Hi.
Hey, hello. Nice music.
We're live, and I wanted to welcome everybody. My name is Raina Kumra. I'm the CEO of Juggernaut, an organizational consultancy, and I'm also an early stage investor with the fund in LA. And we wanted to pull together this conversation about the role of design in this moment. And we have two giants of design joining us, Jonathan Jackson and Paola Antonelli. And my good friend Ken Miller is going to co-moderate with me today. But just in this moment that we have upended our lives, or rather the pandemic, as well as the realization of the social injustice in this country, there is a massive role for design to play as we move forward and as we think about what we want to leave behind permanently and what we want to take forward with us. And so with that, I want to introduce you to Paola. She is the senior curator at the Museum of Modern Art in the Department of Architecture and Design, as well as the founding director of research and development. Her most recent exhibition, Neri Oxman Material Ecology, opened at MoMA in February 2020. And she's also currently working on an iteration of Broken Nature that will be on view at MoMA starting in the fall of 2020. Potentially, and on design at design.emergency on Instagram. And you can follow her project with a collaboration with the critic Alice Rawsthorne about design and the response in COVID-19. And over to you, Ken.
Thank you. Thank you, Raina.
Thanks. Well, thank you for having me co-moderate this. I guess I'll introduce Jonathan. I first met Jonathan because we worked on a project together for Spotify. He's the co-founder of We Should Do It All design studio that he runs with his wife, Sarah. He's done a lot of work for clients such as Nike, the National Museum of African American History and Culture. And I think we wanted to chat about sort of the role of design in working for different clients and the back end role of design.
And I'll also say that, I met Paola. I was very lucky to meet her as a student at the Graduate School of Design at Harvard University, and she was teaching a class on the history of design. So someone who's not just supremely knowledgeable, I think, but incredibly thoughtful about the way and the meaning of objects in this world. And so I wanted to just talk to you a little bit about, how do you see the role of design right now in this moment or in past crises?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for the great introduction, first and foremost. And truly, it's a pleasure to be talking with you and also to get to know Jonathan better. So I knew his work, but it's great to also have a conversation. Where do I see the role of design? Well, you know me, I've been in this career for about 30 years. And forever, I've been thinking that design is the highest form of creative expression that human beings have, because it's at the same time visionary, expressive, and also pragmatic, and gives direction to the world. I also believe that whenever there's a revolution, whether it's scientific or it's political or geopolitical, design is the one that makes this revolution become life. Revolutions would always remain here without the enzyme that metabolizes them into objects of all kind, physical or non-physical, and makes them available to everyone. You know, classical example, the internet, right? Lines of code for a few until the mosaic interface was design, and then it's for everyone. And that happens with every revolution. And right now that we're having this barrage of revolutions, this barrage of change, this need, this urgency that we have inside, and crises that are overlapping onto each other and codependent onto each other, design is even more important than ever. It's more important than ever to inform people, give citizens agency, help politicians implement change, those who are willing to take the responsibility of implementing change, helping scientists percolate their knowledge down to journalists and then disseminate them, so you can keep on going forever, right? Design is as important as it's ever been. And Alice Foster and I are doing the best that we can to make sure that the world understands it.
Could you, like, a really quick question. One of the things you've talked about in the past is design, not just sort of as a visual presentation or, you know, more than an object design, but design as a way of understanding the world, that it's sort of fundamental, like the way cities are designed or the way information is presented plays this really fundamental role in how we interact with the world and understand the world. I'm curious if you could elaborate on that a little bit.
Sure. I mean, we're all design people here, so it becomes almost like a cute adage, but saying that everything is design is so true. Life is design. So I always say to people, right now, Olafur Eliasson just released this app that enables kids to make objects talk. But that's how I've been going through my life, right? Like a Looney Tunes cartoon where the fire hydrant says hello to me in the morning and the MetroCard machine speaks, you know. So design is seriously everywhere. And it is physical objects, it is interfaces, it's visualization design, it is slogans. Now, there are some people that go as far as saying that infrastructure is, but systems are also design. I try to stop, I agree with them, but I stop my my kind of field at having at least one of the senses involved. So to me, scent is also a form of design, but instead systems are a little too much. But yeah, everything is designed, and I want to share this attitude with as wide an audience as possible, because the moment you go through life as if it were a Looney Tunes cartoon, you also know what you expect from people that produce objects of all kinds. You can demand quality, you can demand clarity, you can demand a background check on the sustainability, both ethical and environmental, of a product. So yes, design is everywhere, for real.
Well, Jonathan, that feels like a segue to a lot of what you've been talking about, like the conversations we've had about the structural role of the design, but just like the structural role of the designer, like working with clients and the kind of change you've been talking about.
Yeah, and I actually really agree with Paola on the idea of object and design is the world around us. But I think design, the way we talk about it, one of my favorite MCs is Mos Def, and he has this moment in one of his albums where we talk about hip hop like it's some giant living in the hillside, but no, it's us. And I think the part of design that gets lost is, I think, especially at this moment, this movement that we have, we're starting to understand that. Not starting to. I mean, in my experiences, design has failed us in many ways as well. And when I say design, I mean the people. It's so homogeneous, and the objects that come out of that are very homogeneous. When we are thinking about what we produce from a design point of view, architects, what have you. So I actually agree with Paola on that approach, that design is everywhere, it's everything, but we also, as designers, live on the fringe of our society. We don't have the pipeline to connect to and give access to people in the hood or farmers or what have you. So I feel like while we are making a lot of things that are for good or for bad, we don't promote it well enough. We're on the fringe of these things, I feel like, in how we could have greater impact. I just feel like, I think we need to do a better job of, if we are so gung-ho about what design can do, then we need to be more integrated into our society. And I feel like let's get off the zine, get off Arc Daily, and get access to those communities who actually could really benefit from what we see as the benefits of design.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, that's actually one of the reasons for this conversation. I like to talk about and think about moments of non-design where things have just happened to us versus with any intentionality or conscious sort of thinking about the experience. For example, the TSA. So in 2001, Richard Reed and his explosive sneakers have now led to this policy that for the next 20 years, some government agency just decided that that was the way to tick the box for security. And it's a false sense of security, but it's a stupid thing that we all have to do. And that's the problem, is that when designers aren't involved and they aren't mainstream in really critical decisions, we end up with something like that. And so how do we use this time to make sure that we don't end up having to have our sneakers scanned for the next 20 years?
Well, first of all, I think that there's, it's easy to, I do believe it's easy to explain this to citizens. And funny, people sometimes don't know what designers do. And the moment you explain it to them, it's like a curtain is lifted and a whole world is revealed. Every time that I've been speaking to kids in schools in every borough of New York City. I like to go especially to high schools and sometimes to colleges. All of a sudden, they're flabbergasted. They don't know that a designer is involved in video games, for instance. They think it's only the coding. There's so much that they don't realize. So I think that speaking to citizens is very easy. Speaking to the powers that be is really complicated. I mean, they don't even believe scientists. So why would they believe designers, right? So, I mean, it really is this kind of thick wall that one has to break. And I agree with Jonathan that it's up to us to find the language. And I've always been, for instance, not talking about design, but talking about culture in general. Culture doesn't have the metrics that are necessary to spoon feed politicians in their stump speeches, right? So if we were able to measure the impact of culture on the bottom line, even the financial bottom line of a society with a very safe hand, then we would be able to penetrate their skulls because they would find value into promoting culture for their own re-election purposes. But since we do not have that language, it's incredibly hard. And now I'm talking about cultural institutions, design even more so. It's still considered, it's very easy for everybody to slip into the idea that design is style, that design is superfluous, that it's frivolous, that it's just adding monetary demands on an object. So embellishment. So I feel that it's going to take a while. There are some countries in the world where designers have always had a position of relative power, or at least trusted confidant of politicians. Holland used to be one, but right now with so many political governments going towards this populist, anti-culture, anti-everything that's good positive position, it's becoming harder. What do you think?
This is a little bit of an out of left field question, but Jonathan, one of the things you are very good at in your design is conveying information in a way that's very clear.
Thank you.
And we're in this moment of total just information overload. I think we're all experiencing this. There's a lot coming at us, but there's no hierarchy or presentation. I'm sort of fishing, but what is the role that design can play right now in getting towards actual understanding? Right now, there doesn't seem to be much support for that.
Yeah, you passed along a great article that Paola was a part of being interviewed, and the idea of and Paola, we did a project in East New York where the client wasn't really bought into what we can contribute to the project, and by the end of it, the outcome of we did some posters and what have you, but a part of basically it was prepping East New York business owners to prepare for rezoning. And what we did was sort of design a process for them to create a coalition. And yes, there was posters created, there was some branding created, but that wasn't actually the meat of the work. The meat of the work was actually getting people to buy into the power that they have, the voice that they have. And to your question, Ken, I think it's really, as you said, a mess right now. And if we can start to continue to think about how we can design processes before any to sort of clear the mess. I think that's where the role of design can really take off. Is I want to be careful about using the word systems, but if we can take a step back and look at the bigger picture, like what is the goal? What are we trying to say, accomplish? And we have a huge election coming up right soon. There's so much information to filter through. The goal as designers should be getting access to people who need it the most, and not just having people vote. That's not enough. We need informed voters. And like, I honestly believe that like design needs lobbyists in DC. Like that,
yeah,
that has to happen.
Totally. That is a great idea.
And why I'm going to bring up Pentagram because they're the biggest that we have in this country. But why isn't Pentagram designing a singular ballot for all 50 states? Like we need that level of hierarchy and legibility when it comes to going to the voting booth. To me, it's going to vote and looking at these ballots where I'm confused as a young 40-year-old man. And then I have an 87-year-old woman like, hey, I don't know what's going on. To me, that is another form of voter suppression. Like you're in that booth trying to vote, but you don't understand what you're looking at. I just feel like I don't know how we do it, but we need to start to create these pipelines. Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know if I answered the question, but yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. Well, Raina, do you want to share some, like, I think it might be useful to share some of the work that everybody's done to give us sort
Absolutely. Yes. Well, Jonathan, since we're chatting about, just jumping off from what you were saying and the work that you've done before with information design, I can pull up some of your work here. If you want to walk us through it, give me 1 second. All right. There we are. What are we looking at?
Yeah. So as Ken mentioned, we got to work on the National Museum of African American History and Culture in DC with Ralph Applebaum and Associates, who are like internationally known exhibition designers, and they hired us to work on some strategic things in the beginning of the Slavery to Freedom galleries on the bottom portion of the building, and then on the third floor, as you come up the escalator and come on that floor, we designed 4 galleries on that space, and you're looking at right off the elevator. And then the next slide is some work that we had done for Nike New York headquarters. Their office space is like 150,000 square feet. We did all the environmental graphics, wayfinding, and signage. And then that image to the left is we also designed some bleachers in the basketball court area. And it went on to win our Daily Building of the Year award, which was unexpected, and still scratching my head about that one. But, and then this one is ongoing. It's a traveling show for the Smithsonian called Men of Change. It opened in Cincinnati last year, and it's going to open in LA in August at CAM, California African American Museum. And essentially, it's 25 African American men who changed American history. And we got 25 different artists from across the globe to depict each man in their own concept. Yeah, it was something we're really proud of. I don't know what else I can say about it. I'm not so good about talking about
gorgeous
own work. So thank you. And then,
do you want me to keep going?
Yeah. And then I have some slides that are probably far more interesting than our work. But on the left, a really powerful young woman put together an anonymous letter to the design and architecture world. I actually look up to her quite a bit in her doing so, and the way she had posted it was basically not legible for Instagram. And I asked someone else who was connected to her, could we put this into a format that's legible? And it took off.
Awesome.
And it went around, and it's basically a strong critique to the design world about how racist and sexist it is and continues to be. And then as we live in this moment and have walked through, I've been in design since, I guess, 18 when I entered college for architecture, and going into the workplace mode, just understanding how toxic the workplace can be within the design world. And Sarah and I found this text, and it was posted on Instagram, and it's another thing that we kind of just rewrote and just wanted to bring some more clarity to it. But it's 15 characteristics of white supremacy culture. And if you don't have a characteristic within these 15, you're lying. What's great about this is something that affects everyone has participated in these characteristics somehow, some way. And we will be using this as a guide to improve our work environment, but also, I think just an important piece by Tina.
When I saw this come through, I was so excited because this is the piece that resonated the most out of everything that I've read, and it just gave me like a sense of peace that it could actually be parsed enough, like in enough detail to actually change and explain what has been wrong in corporate culture in America, what has been wrong in schools, what has been like. Now we actually have this wonderful text. I'm not sure how to say the author's name, Tema Okun, but blown away by it. So highly recommend everyone go find it. It's very illuminating, and it's all about power imbalance.
And if you type in her name in Google, I think it's one of the first things that comes up. It's just something that we wanted to put on Instagram for more legible reasons.
Yeah, it's great.
And then this last piece was Ken and I have had a lot of conversations around corporate America in the last few weeks. And this was a response to Nike's horrible, in my eyes, horrible response to the death of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor. It's something that I kind of took. I put it on the We Should Do It All platform, but I usually don't try to talk from my own perspective so much, but this one I had to make sure that the people at Nike saw that it was directly coming from me as a Black man. And I just feel like a corporation that has embedded itself in thinking from Black culture since day one didn't talk to us at all with the ad. And that's it. That's on our Instagram story highlights if you want to read it. It's a little messy. I really didn't think much of it and slapped it up there, and got some advice from some friends before I went up. And but this goes to a deeper conversation too, where Sarah and I have always been aware of who we want to work with, how we want to work with them. Now in this moment, we are becoming hyper aware of that and questioning absolutely everybody, and including Nike moving forward. They've been great to us for 12 years now. And we want to continue that relationship, but we're going to also figure out, create some guidelines on how, when we get paid from Nike, how can that, a percentage of that money get recirculated back into some type of charity, what have you. But we're in a deep analysis of who we are in bed with these days. So,
That's great. Thank you. And what's your Instagram handle so people can?
Yeah, it's We Should Do It all one word. We should do it all. And then on the chalkboard are close friends of ours who are doing really important work within the workplace, and getting we're an agency getting kids of color, creative kids of color, into and keeping them in creative spaces. Scope of work, Jack and Paola.
Awesome.
This is a little bit of a sort of quick segue, but thinking of the consequences of design. Sorry, and this is jumping over to design emergency. I've been thinking a lot about like the inability to convey clear information and how that.
Wait, I missed a little bit. There was an airplane or something flying, and I couldn't hear what you said. You've been thinking of what?
Well, like related to what you're doing with design emergency, like one of the things I've been thinking about is our inability to convey clear information related to COVID. And to me, like one of the prime examples, and this is not a design example, it's a linguistic example, but is the introduction of the term practice social distancing.
I know.
This,
so bad.
Yeah, it's an exercise in non-clarity. It's an exercise of unclear information.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate, and it's taken off. It's so unfortunate that it's taken off because it really conveys the wrong message. There was a great article in The Economist, I think 2 weeks ago, about all the neologisms. I find that also designing language is interesting. So there were some neologisms that were fantastic, like the COVIDiots, like the ones that go around without mask and just like infect everyone. But yes, social distancing is so bad because it's really physical distancing. Socially, we are getting together in new ways. I personally, you were asking Ken about how hard you were talking about how hard it is today to sift information. The funny thing is, ever since the pandemic started, it seemed a little easier for me to decide what's good and what's bad and to know what word of mouth to follow. If anything, my problem is that the bubbles, the bubbles that we live in have hardened. I mean, I have forced myself to watch Fox News. It's hard, but sometimes I do because otherwise I will never know what's going on the other side, right? Once upon a time, there used to be Al Jazeera that gave me a sense of the world, not of the right side of the world, not on the right wing side of the world. I mean, and now I don't have it anymore. So I start like looking at different blogs in different parts of the world. We subscribe to USA Today so that we know what's going on outside of New York and Los Angeles. So in a way, maybe because we had a little bit more time at the beginning, and I was talking about some newsletters, but I feel better about how we get information, but let's go back to design emergency. So design emergency, just as a preface, design.emergency on Instagram is a project that I have started with Alice Rosthorn. And maybe if you want to start looking at some of the images, that would be fun. And you can go a little bit at random. Maybe let's go to some other ones and we'll get back to this one later. So we'll explain. So this is me and Alice. That's perfect. So you can tell Alice and I have been friends forever. She's truly the foremost design critic in the world and writer. She's been for a long time. She was at the New York Times. No, before that, Financial Times, New York Times, then Herald Tribune. She wrote beautiful books. One was Hello World, and the most recent one was Design as an Attitude. And she has the most amazing Instagram feed. Like every week she posts a different theme daily Instagram that are like mini essays that range from like women architects from the beginning of the 20th century to this long series about design in a pandemic that she began right at the beginning of the pandemic. So we've always wanted to do something together. We're friends. So we decided to just join forces to do this series of Instagram Lives conversations with some of the protagonists of the design in the pandemic scene. And sometimes we have this double act in which we talk about specific themes. And one of them was information. And actually, Raina helped me tremendously because she had already this incredible list of great dashboards and great, databases and information design examples. So we did one of these episodes on information, one of the double acts, and we figured out that there are incredibly diverse and interesting examples. There's a beautiful database and dashboard by Federica Fragapane, who was one of the interviews, about vulnerable communities and how they're more susceptible to COVID-19. Then there's a 17-year-old that at the very beginning of the pandemic was frustrated because he didn't read Chinese, he didn't read Mandarin, so he couldn't really know what was going on. So he created this extended network of young coders, and they got together and put together this information design. There's a little bit of like, can you hear this kind of
Noise.
sound in the background? Yeah, you hear it too? Or it's only me? Oh, okay, no worries. And
I do have airplanes going overhead, but
airplane. Okay, perfect. Yeah, now it's perfect. And so we looked at all the different types of information, both data visualization based on databases or information designed by journalists, covers of The Economist. So we really looked at all the information that is going out into the world, and we noticed that there are fabulous examples of clarity, incredibly useful ones. The problem is that there's the filter at the end that muzzles out some of the most important ones. Like I find really difficult to accept what's going on in terms of delivery of information. I mean, yesterday we found out that the White House asked hospitals not to give information to the CDC and instead to send it directly to the White House cabinet members. So that's what's happening. It's the last bit of the delivery that I feel is the problematic one.
Yeah, and you've covered so many different topics with Design Emergency. What have been some of your favorite moments in this response with design?
Well, there have been many, and Alice has covered so many of them. So Alice had a conversation. You can go to this is nice. This was when Alice and I had a conversation about symbolism, like the symbols of the COVID-19 pandemic. So you have at the top the closest picture to reality of what the coronavirus looks like, and at that dimension, you cannot use optics anymore. You have to use an electron microscope that sends a flux of electrons that almost touch the surface of the virus, right? And we had, and down at the bottom instead is this Italian housewife coming out at 6 p.m. to greet the frontline responders. So that was one of the most beautiful duets that we had with Alice. But then there's the official picture of the coronavirus that was instead concocted by Alissa Eckert. That's the blonde woman. Yeah, you can go down to, yeah, this is it. So Alissa Eckert, that is at the bottom, is one of the two people that designed the official image of the coronavirus that we see all the time, the one that looks like Hellraiser with the S proteins that are like red. So that's of course doctored, but it's made in such a way as to make it dangerous, immediately recognizable, and it has like spawned piñatas, desserts. I mean, it's become this kind of like symbol in everybody's imagination. And then the funny thing is that since it's called Design Emergency, when the assassination of George Floyd happened and the situation, the injustice, the systemic injustice of centuries came to a boil, we felt that we needed also to address that because that's also a design emergency. And so what we decided to do was to call in a guest interviewer. And we asked Zoe Whitley, who's the director of the Chisenhale Gallery in London, but that also did this great exhibition that is traveling. There was at Tate Modern. There was art in the time of Black Power, to interview whoever she wanted. And she interviewed Titus Kaphar, who had provided Time magazine with a cover, a very powerful cover, about Black mothers and the loss, the having the sense of loss when they lose their babies. It's called Ambiguous Colors. So we had this guest interviewer, and I think we will do it again in the future, because crises are never independent, and neither are emergencies. We know that there's a correlation between the Black Lives Matters protest and the pandemic, and the environmental crisis that is underlying everything else is still there. So I got to tell you, we want to do a book at the end of this Instagram Live, but what I'm truly hoping is that Alice will accept to go on with this, and we could become like, you know, Queer Eye for the Straight Guy, like a franchise, right? So we can do Design Emergency about everything, because we really are enjoying it tremendously. Tomorrow we're going to have another duet, Alice and I, about the theme of collaboration. Oh, thank you so much. Yes, it's about the theme of collaboration. So it's tomorrow at 11 o'clock Eastern time. So wherever you are, you can tune in.
Great, thank you. I think it's phenomenal. We might have like one or two questions from the audience, but before we do that, any final thoughts, anything you want to leave people thinking about? Any questions, Ken?
I do, but I'll wait after the audience question, but I have sort of a final open-ended question. Or should I just, is it better if I just jump in with it?
Jump in.
I mean, very, very simply, like, we're in this moment of pause. We've talked about it as the Great Reset, this great pause. That means we're looking at the world sort of like, we're looking at the future in a very different way than we normally would. And I'm just curious if you're hopeful for both of you. Like, when you look at the future, are you hopeful?
I'll leave it to you, Jonathan.
I'll say this, Ken. To be Black in America, you have to be hopeful, because we would have been broken a long time ago. So, yes. Yeah.
I also am. I'm energized. It's going to be incredibly tough, but out of tough moments comes real change. So I am very hopeful.
Well, this is wonderful. I think we're pretty much out of time, so we won't take the questions or comments from the audience right now. Unless you guys want to do one, I think we can probably squeeze one in. But
yeah, let's. Otherwise, poor audience.
So this is not quite a question, but it's my friend Cameron Sinclair. I'm sure we all know him. The work of Amplifier tried looking at reframing how we live in a post-COVID world, but the work exposed the confusion of how design arts plays a role in clarity. So are you familiar with the work of Amplifier?
I'm not.
So
I'm afraid.
I think that we are also, Cameron's speaking a little bit about what we were talking about earlier, where how do we get design and the city to talk a little bit more? We have some more clarity here. Designers need to be more subversive and take leadership within the fractures of broken economies, democracies, and social systems. How far should we go? And how do we get into it? How do we get into those moments and those communities where they've never really allowed design to have a seat at the table?
Jonathan.
Yeah, I mean,
ending with a big question.
Yeah, right. I think you know, maybe in our approach to East New York, it was for AIGA New York, who created this project to form a coalition for the business owners. The goal initially was, again, let's design a system so that this can work. What we came out to do was create sort of neighborhood ambassadors, because we knew most of us were white faces. I was the only Black person a part of this, and I'm from New York, but I'm a nerd, so I may not connect with those in East New York. So what we did was we went around and engaged who would be vocal and have enough power within the community so that the word gets spread out more. And to me, that worked perfectly, and I could see that working on a more global scale if that could be expanded out. I think a big problem with design is that we stay in our comfort zones, we stay in our nooks, we stay on the fringes. But to actually gain access that Paola's talking about, we really do have to start engaging and think about designing ways to engage rather than and being sensitive to these communities. Because initially they've been dogged their whole life. Why would they want to talk to us? So it's really thinking about we really have to design each step of the process before we can get to the end goal. I don't know.
I agree. And you should know, Cameron, you've been doing it all your life, but basically it's about gaining people's confidence. You cannot just barge in and say, listen to me, because I am a designer with a capital D. I'm thinking, and that happens both with people in East New York and in Brownsville and with politicians and, and mayors. I'm always thinking of the book that Hillary Cottom, our Alice and my friend, wrote that's called Radical Help. Hillary is from London. She had a company called Participle that it was about doing what you were doing in East New York. She was doing in different parts of London, and she really had to gain people's trust. You just cannot go there and say, I'm going to fix everything. Or another one was Emily Piloton and Project H. She's instead out of California, and what she tried to do instead in, I don't remember where the county was, but it was in the Appalachians, and it was a county that was really probably the poorest county in the United States. And she went there, and she and her husband stayed there for a year and really embedded themselves in the community and gained everybody's trust. So that's what I think we have to do. It's not going to be red carpets.
Yeah. And then he says, how far should we go? It goes back to let's get some lobbyists in DC. We need to go all the way to the top. And right now that leader wouldn't listen to us anyway, but hopefully
Well, I look forward to We Should Do It All design ballot. I think that is an excellent idea. And I think you're right. It's there is a role for designers to play in everything, and they are just not yet doing that. And I would love a world where that happens. So thank you all so much for doing this.
Thank you.
For your knowledge and your wisdom. And we will hopefully see you guys again soon.
Thank you, Raina, Ken, Jonathan. Much love. See you soon.
Okay, bye.
Bye.